Hello, everybody, and welcome to I think this is our seventh interview with scholars and artists for our digital literary arts class. We're very, very happy to have Tina Escaja with us today, and we'll just get right to it. Élika was going to do a short presentation, and we'll start making questions. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you, Tina. Thank you, Alex. We're super excited to have you talk to us and talk to our students, Tina. I'm going to start just giving an introduction that I'm sure doesn't really do justice to everything that you've done, but I'm going to try. Tina Escaja is Distinguished Professor of Spanish and Director of Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies at the University of Vermont. She has published extensively on gender, technology, and representation at the turn of the 20th century in Latin America and Spain. Her scholarly books include the monograph Salomé Decapitada, Elmira Agustini y la estética finisecular de la fragmentación, published in 2000, and the edited volume Compromiso e Hibridez, Aproximaciones a la poesía hispánica contemporánea escrita por mujeres, published in 2007. There's also the very recently released Resistencia, Poems of Protest and Revolution, co-edited with Mark Eisner, which came out this past September. So congratulations, Tina. Yeah, that looks amazing.
Congrats, Tina.
Yes. Escaja is also an accomplished poet, writer, and digital artist. Her creative work transcends the traditional book form. I'm going to be asking about that. Leaping into digital art, robotics, augmented reality, and multimedia projects exhibited in museums and galleries in Spain, Mexico, and the United States. In 2003, she won the International Poetry Prize, Dulce María Loinas, for her book Caída Libre. Other poetry titles include Trece Lunas from 2011, Código de Barras 2007, and Respiración Mecánica 2001-2014. Her collection Manual Destructivista, Destructivist Manual 2016, with English translations by Christine Dijkstra, was selected among the top 10 bilingual readings by Latino Poetry Review in 2017. Her work has been translated into 6 languages and has appeared in literary collections around the world. Some of her digital and literary works can be accessed at her website at www.uvm.edu/Tina Escaja.
Well, you can just do tinaescaja.com.
We can also say that. Yes, tinaescaja.com. Much easier.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I love to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Oh, we're so thrilled. We're so thrilled. And let's begin with some questions. And apparently I've been told that I make really long questions. So here goes a really, really long question. And it's, yes, get ready. And it has to do with the type of readings that we've been doing in class this week. And particularly this week, we were reading Catherine Yusuf's A Billion Black Anthropocenes, or None. I don't know if you're familiar with the book. And Donna Haraway's latest, Staying with the Trouble, as a way to problematize questions about materiality, embodiment, our relationship to the earth, and some pervasive narratives around the way precisely that humans relate to the earth and its creatures. So while your work does not necessarily, is not necessarily pushing this idea of making kin with other, let's say, livable or alive creatures, you do problematize the idea of the human, without a doubt. So let me ask you a very simple question. What is a robot? What is a cyborg? And how do humans relate to both, right? So could you answer these questions addressing particularly your relation to the concepts of robot and cyborg? Thank you.
This is a wonderful and very deep question. I could really take the whole hour to explain my perception of the intersections between not only human and technology, but also technology and poetics. To tell you the truth, actually, I do have very specific works related to interspecies, not only in terms of robotics. I did a performance in Spain called Negro en Ovejas, which is black on sheep. I always have problem with that word, like the sheep. Animal, beef, you know. Yeah,
sheep.
Sorry about my onomatopoeia was really bad. But in that particular case, and it was also transferred into an interface where there is an opportunity for the person navigating the interface to exchange possibilities and interacting with the words and also the possibility of the sheep, of the animals, of these creatures going around creating their own poetry. So once again, we have the questioning of the binaries in many, many ways. In this particular case of Negro en Ovejas will be the concept of humanity in relation of the transhuman, being in relation also with the etymology of transhumante, because as you know, we are defined by, as humans, we are defined by nomadism. And some of the transhumantia had to do with the sheep going from one place to another, in particular in Spain, within that identity. And in that particular case, even in terms of the language itself, you have that the sheep and the shepherd are the same, in the same connection of interspecies, which is something I'm trying to recreate with this particular case of questioning the traditional concept of what is humanity. And that's pretty much my story in a way, because I have another identity. Well, I don't know. I have an avatar. I don't know if it's another identity. I have many identities, like many of us, like all of us in many ways. But my avatar is Alma Perez, as you know, Alma with an @ sign at the end, Alma Perez. And just to simplify that avatar, it has to do with the idea of cyborg, just by inserting that @ sign. That also has to do with the breaking of the gender suffixes in the Spanish language, that, as you know, is very binary. It's either male or female. So we are trying to reconsider that, making it more non-binary, but also because it's a recreation of the concept of existential ideas of what makes us real, what makes us creatures from other person's imagination. In this particular case, Alma Perez is inspired in Augusto Perez, which is a character from the novel by Miguel de Unamuno, Niebla. Augusto Perez transforms itself into a Perez, which is Alma, which is the soul, and Perez, which is the earthy part of myself as well. So in that particular novel, as many people know, is just the character becomes aware of his fictitious identity, and goes and see his creator, Miguel de Unamuno, and confronts that idea of who is I am a creator, I am myself, I have a consciousness, or I'm just your creature. So it's the same with Alma Perez, that questioning of the existential components of what makes us real or not. And that's the story of, if you want, of my robo poems. I have 2 of them here. Is 5 quadrupeds. I have a bigger hexapod. And again, I'm breaking many binaries in this particular project. They are poets by themselves. They have a poem. In the beginning was the poem, and rephrasing the Genesis here too. So they have engraved the poem in Spanish, in their legs, in English, in their back. And the poem is from the point of view of the robot. And it explores those ideas, what makes us creators, what makes us creatures, and explore concepts of cliches in a way, which is like the fear of humanity confronting technology. But also I put it in a 3-dimensional way by presenting it in an arachnid, in an insect-like, which also creates an anxiety and a questioning of our own fears in regard to other species, particularly insects. And they walk, they just encounter each other. They have sensors here. So when they encounter an obstacle, being a human or being another robot, they will start moving backwards and start like with a micro MP3 player, start like reciting the poem. So, well, this is just a sample of many other things that I could discuss regarding to robots or other parts of your question. But thank you for the question. I love it. I think this is pretty much the heart of my understanding of poetry and technology.
Yeah, and I didn't know that actually Alma Perez had to do with Augusto Perez. I mean, I knew it was a pen name. I knew, you know, I very rarely cut the cyborg and whatever, but I didn't know it was Niebla. I mean, are you intending to kill all your creations? Murder them?
That's a very good question. I mean, Miguel de Unamuno, as you know, that he wanted to live in the only way that he thinks is the possibility of living, which is through words, and questions the whole understanding that we have of what the person is, of what identity is. So if I don't kill, maybe I'll be killed by Alma Perez. Let's see who wins.
Yeah. Your robots are going to eat you.
Yeah, the insects. Well, some of the other questions we have, like they kind of elaborate on what you were saying. So I guess kind of just like to narrow them down. So in class also, one of the things, well, two things that we have been discussing is the issue of materiality and how, you know, with particularly digital materialities, there seems to have been dematerialization, like, you know, this kind of materiality that is distance from what you see, as well as the really central notion to posthumanist thinking, that is embodiment. So unlike many works of electronic literature, yours and others that, you know, kind of function mostly, quote unquote, without a body, on the screen level, I guess. Your robot poems have an actual body, which is fascinating in the way that they get animated very differently than animating with like Flash, let's say. So can you tell us, can you, I guess, continue what you were talking about, like the ideas behind making, you know, electronic literature, digital literary arts with a very clearly material body? What does embodiment in a robot body, you know, implicate or signifies in the robot poemas?
Wow, this is another interesting question. This is fascinating because I think that poetry in general is a resistance, it's an act of resistance, and it's not because I want to promote my book. It's an act of resistance.
But I will, let me just.
But I will.
But that works.
Because poetry just break continuity in many ways. The continuity of the perception of the language, of the world, etc. So it's like a deslumbramiento, you know, how you go beyond those words and the reality and transfer into something else. So, so as a resistance, I also tend not to be limited by one particular way of understanding or creating or presenting poetry in this case. I'm just fascinated by whatever is there that I think can be a different way of presenting the world and to make us think and to create this aesthetic and also ethical questions. So, so Flash animation, it was my tool, was my canvas. That was the way I understood also a poetry movement that was very, it had many possibilities, right? Flash is disappearing, as you know, in December. So it's not, I'm not happy about it, but I understand it. I'm moving different directions, but not out of, the fact is that over the years, even though when I was using Flash, which is the screen, the disembodied presence of poetry, I already did explore other media like barcodes, which is one of the projects, is more political project that I have so far, and it has to do with resistance as well against the barcodes of imperialism, of consumerism, of control. Barcodes are obsolete now. I use more QR codes. QR codes are still not embodied, but the fact is that I put it outside of the body by creating installations where people could go to the gallery and using a barcode reader, they could find sounds and poems and very disturbing things as well. And the idea was, you know, to give the power to people instead of having that weapon to control the people through barcodes. So that was the intersections between the body, disembodying, embodying, the poetic component, the poetic interface in this way, with a way of connecting too. The robots is something that needed to be, it was a natural way to go, because first it was the poem again, and the poem was written from the point of view of the robot, so the robot needed to be exploring these issues. And we are all cybers. It's not just the identity that I chose, but we're all cybers. We're all connected. We have our machines there. We are communicating through machines, technology. But the artificial intelligence is the next, big thing, or is the current big thing. And I needed to explore an idea of creating these creatures physically and three-dimensionally. And my initial idea was to that idea of anxiety and fear and ultimate connection by creating a very, very, very big, like a Godzilla-like robot poem that will come to you, or as sort of a spider, because spiders are also the net. The net is the ultimate spider, right? A mother spider. So it will come to you very, and question you, why are you afraid of me? Who created you? And say so it really makes you.
I'm already feeling it.
I know, you're a creeper.
So that's the ultimate body experience, correct? But I had to reduce my ambition to my own limited resources and knowledge of robotics. So they became smaller creatures. I can bring you one.
Yes.
Or maybe not, because it's very hard. Sorry, it's kind of far. I put it there now. Sorry, okay. Maybe later.
That's okay, you're fine.
It's okay, sorry about that. So I did this because it was a necessity to explore deeply this exchange, like a body exchange, because we are cybers, but we are also we have a three-dimensional presentation of ourselves that is also in many ways manipulated by many issues. So my manipulation had to do with other aspects. For example, breaking that binary, the legs are made out of organic material on purpose. Because I want to, the organic, I want to establish those connections, right? Instead of the metal, the artificial. So, so yes, I thought that it was necessary, without really going further in terms of theoretical components, to establish a physical relation with, between humans and robots in this case, and establish kind of a dialogue in a way. So yeah, and it just happened. It's something that is hard to explain. What is the level of rationality into the moves that you do artistically, right? So I needed to do it. It was an obsession, and I made them, and they are very clumsy because that's my limitations. I have no one there, but I love that because also it maintains that. Increases the element of anxiety and inquietude. I don't know, inquietude.
Yeah, kind of uncanny and unnatural.
Exactly.
And yeah, no, that is brilliant. It's fascinating.
Thank you.
I mean, I've seen them moving, because I don't remember what, I think maybe it was like the ELO exhibit maybe last year or 2 years ago. I've seen them live, and they are kind of creepy. So so it's really, and yet, this sort of because of the tactile nature and the wood, it's still approachable, and you kind of want to touch it a little bit, but you don't want it to move. So it's a very interesting thing. And I think it's a good way to consider the next question that we had to you, that I think is it's necessary to address at this point. And it does spring from your engagement and approach to the body, which also has to do with these questions of possessionality, voice, and subjectivity that of course refer us to feminist questions, right? I mean, this is an enactment of a very clear feminist practice. So tell us explicitly about the centrality of feminism in your work.
Well, this is great. I definitely am a feminist, and I am very an activist in many ways. I'm, right now we are doing a lot of stuff for what is going on, happening soon. the whole concept of the internet as the way that it was presented itself, especially at the beginning, even though it's a little bit essentialist, is the idea which is decentered. The hierarchy is broken. So there are many components also addressed by classics like Donna Haraway to establish like a new locus of disembodiment, and at the same time, like the cyborg instead of a goddess, but at the same time, an opportunity to open up to other voices. This degradation, linearity of the internet itself as an opportunity for other identities, not only, you know, trans, LGBT, and is extraordinary as a landscape for those ways, but particularly, in my opinion, for women. It's not the special, it's not the perfect possibility, but it's one possibility of creating new alternatives to the traditional way of a linearity of the canon has been based on the letter, which is literatura, right? Mm-hmm. And is based on an agenda that emphasized almost exclusively, if not exclusively, men, white, mm-hmm. and the heteronormative form. Mm-hmm. So by breaking with that linearity and going into the digital space, we are giving that opportunity mm-hmm. to be expressed also theoretically to the women's expression, to the women's presence. There are issues, but I think that's important. That's the way I also embrace it. I embrace the internet and my identity as Alma with an at sign as a political presence that is primarily feminist. Some of my my work, just by doing non-binary possibilities, I'm discussing the inner option of having the female voice also present. And also I have performances that emphasize like my movement, the movement that I created on the grave of Vicente Huidobro in the day of resistance, Mapuche Resistance Day, which was October 12th. In that case was 2015. I created a movement just to break with the canonical male positioning of literature. So by going from the letter, the literature, the written word, to the cybernetic creature, you are doing a feminist, in my opinion, a feminist activist move as well. Well, a little abstract, but it's kind of there. Definitely the feminist presence is always there in my work, definitely.
Yeah, even just by emphasizing that embodied and fleshed, you know, expression in a gendered, you know, always gendered, always racial, always, you know, it's interesting. And that also goes against that sort of immaterial, invisible, universal man that is like floating around. And yeah, it's very, very powerful in your work.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I think we're like on exactly the same wavelength, because the following question has to do with exactly what you're saying, and I'm loving that it's you know, going so seamlessly. So something that the corpus of your work through many years, it reveals a media landscape that we have been discussing in class too, and that I particularly am very interested in my own research, you know, from page to digital to page again, to fabrication of robots, to avatars, etc., etc. And you were talking about this, you know, these movements as, you know, first kind of irrational, then part of a feminist praxis too. So can you, you know, tell us a little bit more about how you use, or the relationship that you have to these various material substrates, like their networks of signification, you know, the kind of like the communication protocols, and so on. So basically, you know, can you elaborate on what you were already saying?
I'm not quite sure where you're going with your question, but I can emphasize a little bit more my the movement, for example, that I thought it was important to present within this multimodality which is the destructivism, as a way of reframing what both of you are asking in your previous questions. So the destructivism is, or destructivismo, which is slash there, just to break also the grammatical dictatorship in language as well. The destructivismo, it has to do with many of the components that you were saying. It was created it was created based on performance, happenings, and collaboration. And what the base of that had to do also with the written word. So it kind of escapes, but it's always the same component of the digital because it is documented by social media. There was this book that I wrote that won the Nobel, Dulce Maria Loinaz Prize. One of the few Hispanic one of the few prizes with the name of a woman, by the way, an amazing Premio Cervantes Cuban writer, Dulce Maria Loinaz. And this is a very feminist book of poetry. By the way, it's funny because I always been Alma Perez, and suddenly they understood it the other way. And they saw that who wrote it was Tina Escaja, which was true, but not. But anyway, Tina Escaja became more open to the people who knew me, who thought I was Alma Perez. It doesn't matter. But the fact is that this book is extremely feminist. It recreates, it breaks with the idea of, let's say, God as a masculine presence and very oppressive. The institution of many, pretty much all institutionalized religions are patriarchal, are oppressive for women. So it has lots of connotations related to that resistance. But the second edition of this book kind of, in my opinion, censored those elements. So what I did with the second edition, with the many books I gave me, that was part of the deal. So I just break it in public, and I ask the audience to break it with me, in the sense of not only making a destruction of the book, but to create new possibilities with the pages of this book. That's why it's inverted the idea of creacionismo, which is the movement by Vicente Huidobro, my homage to the avant-garde. And we are all avant-garde experimental writers and artists in this particular case, the digital. But also deconstructing it in a way that is productive, that is simply breaking the canon and making it the physicality, as you said, and using the social media to document those happenings is where that multimodality is going from the personal to the collective and the community, which is the touching, the toqueteo that we were discussing, do you remember, in the summer? So this touching is based on the digital life, where you can participate, you can interact, you can give opportunities of redefining and creating new authorship with the product. So the same with this book, but once again, physical. You break it, I mean, if you want, of course, and you break those pages and you create something else that for you is disgusting or beautiful. So by making that, you are making a questioning of the canon in the way that it has been delivering a particular agenda that is fundamentally patriarchal and limited. So, so I guess I went through your questions.
Yeah, no, totally. And I guess I should have been more explicit, because the one work that I had particularly in mind was barcodes, the Código de Barras, because you have them like, well, you have a web version, but they've also been shown as installation, and there's also a book. So, kind of thinking also about the different publics, the different, I guess the meanings that get emphasized by each of the particular presentations.
That's a good point. No, I didn't, sorry. To tell you the truth, Élika, I just thought that presenting these concepts from different media as a way to establish that connection, but it's true.
Right.
I mean, the signifiers are different according to how people experience each of them. So yeah.
Yeah, and it creates a sense of
Sorry about that, but I have to say something. It's funny because I always try to get the Código de Barras. I thought I should, it's digital electronic literature, but it wasn't really, I couldn't get it anywhere within the electronic literature communities for some reason.
That's so interesting.
It defies the, apparently, the electronic literature discourse. Sorry.
It's illegible. I guess that's really interesting.
That's so great. I was thinking a great medium for that one would be also like milk cartons or something.
Right.
Like an installation for it, just like commodities that have these barcode poems in them.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's really great.
Yeah, and I mean, because as a barcode, it has like all of this, like, the poems operate as a, very as visual art if you put them in a gallery, as, interactive application, even app-like, mobile app-like, just touching here and there. And as a book, but it has so many lives. I guess that's how I was imagining it.
Yeah, and each live, it touches on the idea of that object as, a larger network of the object, the way it circulates, the conventions associated to it, the economies around it. So it multiplies and it loops, and that's really powerful. And I think it's a good way to just end with our last questions, thinking about this multi-embodiments and distributions and whatever that has to do, and lives, that has to do with the multilingual nature that seems to be also a constant on your work. Could you speak to this? Is it a function of the medium or of the times, or your relationship to various linguistic communities, your identity? What's up with the multilingualism?
I think it has to do with what you actually mentioned, both of you, before. I mean, this component of the necessity of interaction and touching has to do also with the approach in different levels, in this case, linguistic levels. It also touches into the idea of the neologism, because in Velocity, which was my first work, which is an interface in electronic literature, in Velocity, I mean, in this homage to the avant-garde as well, I invent words that don't exist. Velomano, it does, velogamo, I transform the language itself. So by working with different possibilities of languages, I'm breaking again, I'm disrupting the linearity of either the canon, the linguistic component, or even the dominance of one particular way of expressing poetry in this case, and humanity in this case. There is a tyranny of the dominant languages, in particular in the internet, is the English language. So I think that this is limiting. So it's important for me always to incorporate as many languages in that desire of established connection, which is, after all, what we do as digital artists. I mean, to establish those hypertext, as the basic, just touching. When I do gallery shows, I always say the opposite of the usual, touch, please, interact. It's interesting because now I am in a dilemma because I'm having a gallery show in November. And the whole thing was going to be based on touching, and now I have to redefine the whole thing because of the COVID. So yeah, multi-languages has to do with touching, with enacting our human element of encountering with other people, and not to limit ourselves within a canonical tradition, a language tradition, which is not only elitist but very limiting. So that's part of the post-human being even more human than we've been until now.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also interesting to think of that in relation to making your work legible to literary histories, right? And, your work is like, okay, well, so, when in our discipline, we try to think of, Spanish writers of the 20th century, but, oh, well, but she's from Spain, so it's not Latin American artist of the 20th century, but she's in the US, but she's not Chicana, so then it's not, so that, you know, it's very interesting as a concept that formulates within your practice. And when you mix in languages, it kind of really even disrupts the discipline, right? Because it makes you very difficult to taxonomize, and it's very, it's great, you know, but it's complicated too for the discipline.
This is the idea of eccentricity, to be outside the center. That creates issues, you know, when Leonardo Flores, you know, is doing the Latin American canon, and people who are like in the diaspora in many ways for different reasons, for different dynamics, could be economic, exiles of different elements. That decentralization creates issues for establishing, you know, norms, inventing norms, which is all this other agenda. And I love that. I mean, the fact that people cannot establish, put me in any place. I enjoy it because also questions those particular ways of definitions, right? So I think humans are very complex. We have many technological components in ourselves, in our bodies. So it makes sense not to be limited to a particular category. But it's tough. It's tough sometimes because you are not Spanish anymore, Alex, too, right?
No, I know. I don't know. It's like, I'm not going to make it into the Spanish anthology or to the Californian anthology, to the Latin American anthology. Like, what are you? But it's because there's that element of what you're in your work, you transcend the body, you transcend in it by, you know, reinforcing that everybody is it's somewhere always, right? But also breaking then the idea of, I don't want to say well, it is post-national, you know, it's geological in a different way. It's territorialized, but deterritorialized. And so that's very interesting. And again, it's deeply feminist, I think.
It's so cool too.
Very quickly. I mean, here is one of the elements that I really love, the Rosy Braidotti, you know, the feminist view of the.
We all love her.
Sorry about that.
Totally. No, that's great. And I was just going to say, like, that is also one element that I always find fascinating about your work, but in general also to digital literary arts that are like extremely like radically contemporary, because it responds not just to kind of like the nowness of whatever technology becomes available at a given time or becomes obsolete, as you know, we've been talking about Flash in class and here today, but also because it responds very well to kind of like the times, the times of, you know, these things, post-nationalism, understanding, you know, globality, not as globalization, but as something geological or geohistorical, I guess, to go back to Jason Moore a little bit, and so on. So yeah, this is everything that you've been saying has been very thought-provoking along those lines to me.
Yes, it's a beautiful enactment of those theories.
Well, thank you. Actually, the latest work that I have is the one I presented in ELO, last physical ELO
in Ireland.
In Ireland. Is there like, it has to do exactly what you said. I mean, it's like 3 maps. Which is related to myself as a nomadic person, but also the nomadism goes with the raton, with the mouse going around the letters, creating new concepts and disrupting that map, because the static map needs to be questioned. So it's exactly what you're saying. I mean, I don't even try that, but I guess I believe in the fact that we live in particular moment, and we have to respond and react towards that particular moment. Is something of I have that impulse and that necessity. And I think that the things that really are more productive, in my view, are those artists, writers, theorists that are within what is happening now. That's a form of disruption, because the tendency is to maintain that linearity that we definitely need, like the raton, to disrupt.
Totally.
Okay, and I think on that
excellent
disruption thought, we're gonna end our conversation this week. Thank you so much, Tina. It was really a pleasure.
I loved it. Sorry, I had so much to say, so I was like,
really.
us.
That's exactly what we wanted. We would have taken no less.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tina.